Morning routines set the stage for how your brain and body will function throughout the entire day. But while most people focus on what they should do in the morning, very few pay attention to the things they must avoid. Neuroscience research, especially insights from Dr. Andrew Huberman, shows that certain habits in the first 60-90 minutes after waking can actually disrupt your hormones, decrease focus, and blunt your natural energy rhythms. So if you want sustained alertness, better sleep at night, and peak performance throughout the day, you need to know what not to do the moment you wake up. Perfect. I'll expand the first keynote, don't look at your phone immediately, into a long-form speech of about 1,000 words, written in an Andrew Huberman style mix of neuroscience, psychology, and practical advice. I'll keep it as one flowing piece, no headings, as you asked. When you wake up in the morning, your brain is not immediately ready to handle the flood of information, emotions, and dopamine triggers that the modern digital world throws at you. For thousands of years, the human nervous system evolved to wake gradually, first by detecting changes in light in the environment, then by gradually activating internal stress and alertness hormones that prepare the body for movement, for thinking, and for social interaction. The transition from sleep to wakefulness is one of the most delicate shifts your brain goes through in a 24-hour cycle. If you disrupt that transition by grabbing your phone immediately after waking, you interrupt a natural process that sets the tone for your entire day. Neuroscience tells us that the first thing your brain craves upon waking is orientation to the external world, particularly through natural light exposure and gradual engagement with your environment. When instead you replace that with the artificial blue light from your screen, rapid bursts of novel stimuli, and the high dopamine hits of scrolling through notifications, emails, or social feeds, you are essentially hijacking your nervous system. You push your brain into a reactive state rather than a deliberate, stable one. What actually happens in the brain at this time? During sleep, particularly in the latter part of the night, your prefrontal cortex, the area of your brain responsible for focus, planning, decision, making, and impulse control, is in a state of reduced activity. This is part of the reason dreams can feel so chaotic. The rational filter of the brain is not fully online. When you wake, the prefrontal cortex is still in the process of booting up, so to speak. It is not yet fully ready to handle high levels of input. On the other hand, your limbic system, which governs emotion and reward, is extremely sensitive at this point. If the very first thing you do is check a device filled with unpredictable information, messages from work, news alerts, likes on social media, you are flooding the limbic system with dopamine, and you're doing it at a moment when your prefrontal cortex is least equipped to regulate that surge. The result is that your brain learns day after day to start from a place of reactivity and scattered focus. Over time, this erodes your ability to sustain concentration and increases baseline stress. From the perspective of dopamine biology, this matters even more. Dopamine is not just the molecule of pleasure, it's the molecule of motivation and drive. When you expose yourself to a dopamine spike immediately upon waking, through the novelty and unpredictability of your phone, you set an artificially high threshold for what your brain will consider stimulating and rewarding for the rest of the day. In other words, a quick scroll through your feeds may feel harmless, but it actually diminishes your ability to feel engaged with lower dopamine but important tasks like reading, focused work, or even meaningful conversations. This is because the brain is always adjusting to its most recent dopamine peaks. When the peak is too high, the baseline drops. So if you spike dopamine right away, your baseline motivation for the day drops below where it should naturally be, leading to fatigue, distractibility, and the constant urge to check your phone again. Cortisol, the so-called stress hormone, also plays a key role here, Every healthy nervous system experiences a natural rise in cortisol in the first hour of waking. This is not a bad thing. In fact, it's essential. That cortisol spike helps clear sleep inertia, increase alertness, and set in motion the biological clocks that regulate energy throughout the day. But if your first action is to stare at a device, you are layering artificial stress onto this natural cortisol rise. The notifications you see, perhaps an urgent work email, troubling news, or even just a flood of trivial update, add an unpredictable stress load on top of the biology that's already in motion. Instead of allowing cortisol to do its job naturally, you introduce volatility. Over time, this pairing of cortisol with phone-triggered stress trains your body to associate waking with anxiety. Many people wonder why they feel stressed before their day has even begun. This is one of the reasons. Another issue is attention residue. When you scroll first thing in the morning, you don't just consume information and then move on. Your brain continues to process and rehearse fragments of what you saw, an image, a headline, a message, while you try to do other tasks. This is called attention residue, and it degrades performance in whatever activity you shift to next. If you begin your day this way, your mental energy is already divided before you even tackle your first meaningful task. Contrast that with a morning where your attention is first anchored in your environment, through movement, light exposure, or even journaling, and you begin the day with a single, stable attentional frame. That sets you up for better focus, fewer distractions, and more control over your cognitive resources. This is not just theory. Studies show that people who delay phone use in the morning report lower levels of stress, better focus, and higher productivity. Anecdotally, many find that simply waiting 30 to 60 minutes before checking their phone dramatically reduces the sense of being overwhelmed. Andrew Huberman often emphasizes that the nervous system is plastic. It learns whatever patterns you repeat. If you teach your nervous system that mornings are a time for stability, presence, and natural cues like light and movement, it will adapt in that direction. But if you teach it that mornings are a time for instant reactivity and digital stimulation, it will also adapt to that, locking you into a cycle of distraction. What then should you do instead? The first step is to recognize that mornings are about setting an anchor point for your nervous system. When you wake, resist the urge to grab your phone. Get out of bed, hydrate, and expose your eyes to natural light if possible. This light exposure stimulates special cells in the retina that send signals to the suprachiasmatic nucleus of the brain, which in turn regulates cortisol and melatonin. In other words, light tells your brain, it's morning, it's time to be alert, in a way that is stable and healthy. Adding light movement, walking, stretching, or even a few minutes of breath work further stabilizes your physiology. Once your brain has gone through this natural transition, then you can safely bring in digital information without destabilizing your system. It's also important to understand that not all phone use is equal. Checking a necessary calendar appointment or using your device for guided meditation is not the same as mindlessly scrolling social feeds. The problem lies not in the phone itself, but in the unpredictable novelty it delivers. The human brain is wired to crave novelty, and social media is designed to exploit that circuitry. When you combine that craving with the vulnerable state of your just awakened brain, you get a cocktail that wires you for distraction. So, if you must use your phone early, make it intentional, time, limited, and tied to a specific purpose. But as a general rule, the longer you can delay non-essential phone use, the better. Think of it this way. The first 30 to 60 minutes of your morning are like wet cement. Whatever impressions you make in that time harden and set the shape of your cognitive and emotional state for the day. If the impression is one of calm, focus, and gradual activation, that is what carries forward. If it is one of chaos, dopamine spikes, and reactivity, that too will carry forward. This is why protecting your mornings from the immediate intrusion of your phone is not a small detail. It is one of the most powerful levers you have for controlling your energy, focus, and mood throughout the day. In short, when you reach for your phone first thing in the morning, you are outsourcing control of your nervous system to algorithms and notifications designed to capture your attention. When you resist that urge, you reclaim the ability to start your day on your own terms. This isn't about rejecting technology. It's about respecting biology. Your brain and body have a rhythm that has been fine-tuned over millennia, and if you honor that rhythm, you get clarity, energy, and resilience. If you ignore it, you get stress, distraction, and fatigue. The choice is simple but powerful. Never look at your phone immediately upon waking. Give your brain the chance to wake up the way it was designed to, and you will feel the benefits not just in the morning, but across your entire day. When you wake in the morning, your body is essentially looking for a time cue, a signal that tells your brain and every cell in your system what time of day it is. Without that signal, your circadian rhythm drifts, and the result is low energy during the day, difficulty focusing, and trouble falling or staying asleep at night. One of the most powerful and reliable time cues is natural light. Yet many people make the mistake of skipping this crucial step in their morning routine. They wake up, maybe check their phone, get coffee, go straight into indoor environments, and only encounter natural light much later in the day. The problem with this is that you are delaying the biological clock that sets all your hormones, your alertness, and your sleep rhythm in motion. Andrew Huberman often emphasizes that light is the master regulator of the circadian system. There are special cells in the retina called intrinsically photosensitive retinal ganglion cells. These cells don't help you see in the way rods and cones do. Instead, they detect light intensity and send that information directly to the brain's master clock, the suprachiasmatic nucleus. That clock then signals the rest of the body to release hormones, adjust temperature, and set energy cycles. When those cells get early daylight, especially from the low-angle morning sun, they trigger a cascade that results in a healthy cortisol spike. This cortisol rise is not about stress in the negative sense. It's about promoting alertness, focus, and readiness. It's also the cue that starts a timer for when your body will begin to release melatonin in later that night, helping you fall asleep more easily. So, if you avoid morning light, you're not just missing out on a wake-up boost, you are essentially telling your brain that it's still night. That throws your cortisol rhythm out of sync, which can cause grogginess in the morning, an energy crash in the afternoon, and restless sleep at night. Think of it like setting a clock in your kitchen. If you never set it in the morning, it will drift, and by evening, it's showing the wrong time. The circadian system works the same way. Without that anchor of light, your internal clock drifts later and later, especially in our artificial light environment where screens and indoor bulbs dominate. People then find themselves unable to fall asleep until late at night, waking tired and wondering why their energy feels unstable. The solution is simple but requires consistency. Get outside within the first 30 to 60 minutes of waking and expose your eyes to natural light. Even on a cloudy day, the light outdoors is far brighter and more effective at activating those retinal cells than any indoor light source. A few minutes is enough if it's bright, and on overcast days you may need 10 or 20 minutes. The key is that you are sending the right signal at the right time. Skipping this exposure also deprives you of one of the most natural ways to stabilize mood. Research shows that people who get morning sunlight consistently have lower rates of depression and anxiety. The reason is partly biological. Light triggers serotonin in production, which is later converted into melatonin in the evening. So, Sunlight in the morning literally sets up the chemistry for calmness and sleep at night. If you start your day without that input, your serotonin cycle is weaker, and you are more vulnerable to mood dips. Add to that the fact that your dopamine system is tuned by circadian rhythm, and you begin to see why morning light is non-negotiable if you want stable motivation and mental health. The modern world, however, makes it easy to skip. Many of us wake up, flip on indoor lights, and spend the first hours of the day under artificial illumination that is too dim in intensity and often the wrong wavelength compared to natural sunlight. The human eye is designed to register the specific blend of blue and yellow wavelengths in early morning light. That unique spectral composition is what tells your body this is morning. Indoor bulbs, no matter how bright they look, do not replicate this effect. That's why simply turning on lights indoors cannot replace going outside. The difference is orders of magnitude in lux intensity. Indoor lighting might give you 300 to 500 lux, while outdoor morning light, even through cloud cover, gives 10 zeros, 0 to 20, 0 lux. This difference is what makes those retinal cells fire strongly enough to reset your circadian rhythm. Some people argue they don't have time in the morning, or that they'll just make it up by going outside later. But the timing matters. Getting sunlight at noon or in the evening does not have the same effect because your circadian system is sensitive to light at different times of day. Morning light anchors your rhythm in one direction. Evening light can actually push it later, delaying sleep. So, by skipping morning light, you not only miss the positive effects, but you also set yourself up for conflict when you inevitably get light exposure at night from screens, which pushes the rhythm even further out of alignment. Another factor is cortisol timing. Cortisol is supposed to peak within an hour of waking, giving you energy, and then taper off through the day. If you skip morning light, that peak is delayed or blunted. Your body may then compensate with random spikes later in the day, which feels like anxiety or restlessness, and because melatonin in release at night is linked to the earlier cortisol signal, you often won't feel sleepy when you should. This is one of the most common causes of insomnia in people who otherwise don't have medical sleep disorders. They simply never set their clock with light, so their system is drifting. The good news is that the fix is free and accessible to nearly everyone. Step outside, look toward the sky, not directly at the sun, but in the direction of the open sky, and let that light hit your eyes for a few minutes. You don't need to stare, you can walk, stretch, or sip your water. The important thing is that it's unfiltered natural light. Glass windows block out much of the necessary wavelengths, so being inside by a window doesn't count. For those in very dark or high-latitude environments in winter, bright light therapy lamps can help, but the gold standard remains actual sunlight when possible. Think also about how this practice affects your behavior. When you start the day by going outside, you're not just getting light, you're also moving your body, orienting to your environment, and breathing fresh air. These small acts compound into a sense of alertness and presence that no amount of caffeine can substitute. In fact, people who adopt this habit often find they rely less on stimulants throughout the day because their energy feels more stable. Andrew Huberman often reminds listeners that the nervous system is plastic, meaning it adapts to repeated behaviors. If you consistently skip morning light, your system adapts to a drifting, unstable rhythm. If you consistently get that light, your system adapts to stability. It's a matter of what you train. The cost of ignoring this is huge. Fatigue, mood instability, poor sleep, and even metabolic issues, since circadian rhythm also controls appetite hormones like ghrelin and leptin. Studies have shown that people who don't align their circadian rhythm through light are more prone to weight gain, insulin resistance, and reduced cognitive performance. So when you think about what to avoid in the morning, skipping natural light should be high on the list. It may seem like a small detail, but it is one of the most powerful levers you have for health. The first hour of your day is not the time for fluorescent bulbs and phone screens. It is the time for stepping outside, orienting your biology, and giving your brain the strongest signal possible that the day has begun. If you treat morning light as optional, your energy and sleep will always feel unstable. If you treat it as essential, you will experience sharper focus, more consistent mood, and deeper sleep at night. The choice is simple, and the science is clear. Never skip morning light. When most people wake up in the morning, their first instinct is to reach for a cup of coffee, an energy drink, or tea. It's almost a cultural ritual at this point. Eyes barely open, feet hitting the ground, and the hand automatically reaching for caffeine. But while caffeine is a powerful tool for enhancing alertness and focus, drinking it immediately after waking is actually one of the biggest mistakes you can make if you want sustained energy, better mood, and more stable sleep. The reason lies in the biology of adenosine and cortisol, two molecules that govern how sleepy or awake you feel across the 24-hour cycle. When you wake, adenosine, the chemical that builds sleep pressure in the brain, is at its lowest point. Your body naturally clears adenosine during sleep, which is why you wake feeling refreshed if you slept well. At the same time, cortisol is spiking. This cortisol awakening response is nature's version of an alertness cocktail. It increases heart rate slightly, elevates body temperature, and signals every system in the body to shift from rest to readiness. If you immediately consume caffeine during this window, you are interfering with the natural system that is already designed to wake you up. Here's why this matters. Caffeine works by binding to adenosine receptors. Normally, adenosine builds up through the day as a byproduct of energy metabolism in the brain. The more adenosine that binds, the sleepier you feel. When caffeine occupies those receptors, adenosine can't bind, and you feel alert. But if you drink caffeine right after waking, when adenosine is already low, you're not blocking much in the first place. You are essentially wasting the most powerful phase of caffeine's effect at a time when you don't need it. Later, as adenosine naturally starts to accumulate, your caffeine is already wearing off. This is why people who drink coffee immediately often feel an energy crash mid-morning and then need more caffeine to get through the day. Over time, this creates dependency cycles where you constantly chase alertness instead of working with your natural rhythms. Delaying caffeine for 90 to 120 minutes after waking aligns with how your biology is set up. During those first 2 hours, cortisol peaks naturally, giving you alertness for free. By waiting, you let cortisol do its job without interference. Then, when cortisol begins to taper and adenosine starts to creep back, you introduce caffeine. At that point, caffeine is doing what it was designed to do: block adenosine when it matters. The effect is more stable energy, less crashing, and less reliance on multiple cups of coffee. Andrew Huberman often explains that this timing doesn't mean you can't have coffee. It means you should treat caffeine like a tool, and tools work best when used at the right time. Another issue with immediate caffeine is its effect on sleep quality. Caffeine has a half-life of about 5 to 7 hours, meaning that if you drink it early, some of it is still in your system by evening. But when you consume it as soon as you wake, you are also altering the relationship between adenosine and sleep pressure for the entire day. Because you blocked adenosine when it was already low, you create an artificial dip in the normal rhythm, which often leads to more intense accumulation later. This is part of why people who drink caffeine first thing in the morning not only crash midday, but sometimes also struggle with restless or fragmented sleep at night, even if they stop drinking coffee in the afternoon. There's also the issue of tolerance. The brain adapts to chronic caffeine use by creating more adenosine receptors. This means you need more caffeine to feel the same effect. If you flood your system with caffeine at the wrong time every single day, tolerance builds faster. You end up needing higher doses to get alert, and without caffeine, you feel more tired than you should. By waiting those 90 to 120 minutes, you reduce this tolerance effect because you're only consuming caffeine when adenosine is actively competing, not when it's absent. Over weeks and months, this preserves caffeine's effectiveness. From a practical standpoint, delaying caffeine also forces you to establish other morning habits that improve alertness naturally, getting sunlight, hydrating, moving your body, and breathing deeply. These behaviors strengthen your circadian rhythm and your nervous system's natural arousal pathways. If you skip them because you rely on instant caffeine, you become dependent on an external molecule instead of strengthening the biology that's already there. People who try delaying coffee often notice after a week that their baseline morning energy improves even before caffeine. That's a sign that their cortisol and circadian systems are finally working the way they're supposed to. It's also worth noting that caffeine interacts with dopamine in important ways. Caffeine doesn't increase dopamine release in the same way as stimulants like amphetamines, but it does increase dopamine receptor availability. This means it makes the dopamine you do release feel more effective. Timing this correctly matters because dopamine is a key driver of motivation and focus. If you pair caffeine with the natural dopamine and cortisol rise later in the morning, you get a synergistic effect that enhances your ability to focus on tasks. If you consume caffeine too early, you blunt that effect and lose one of caffeine's greatest benefits. None of this is to demonize coffee or caffeine. In fact, research shows that moderate caffeine intake is associated with better cognitive performance, reduced risk of neurodegenerative diseases, and even improved athletic performance. The key is using it wisely. Imagine caffeine as a spotlight. You can shine it when the stage is already lit and waste the bulb, or you can wait until the natural light starts to fade and then use the spotlight to extend the brightness. Timing is everything. Of course, everyone's biology has some variability. Some people metabolize caffeine faster due to genetic differences in the CYP1A2 enzyme. These fast metabolizers may be able to tolerate caffeine later in the day without sleep disruption. Slow metabolizers, on the other hand, may need to cut off caffeine by noon or risk insomnia. But regardless of metabolism speed, the principle of delaying caffeine after waking applies universally because it's tied to cortisol and adenosine, not just metabolism. Another important point is hydration. Overnight, you lose water through breathing and sweat, and you wake slightly dehydrated. If you immediately drink caffeine, which is mildly diuretic, you exacerbate this dehydration. This contributes to the jittery, anxious feeling some people get from their morning coffee. By waiting and hydrating first, ideally with water and electrolytes, you reduce this effect. When you finally do consume caffeine, it feels cleaner and smoother because your body is not in a dehydrated state. So, the advice is simple but profound. When you wake up, resist the urge to reach for caffeine. Instead, get natural light, hydrate, and move your body. Let cortisol and your circadian biology do what they are meant to do. Then, after 90 to 120 minutes, enjoy your coffee or tea. You'll notice more sustained energy, less of a crash, and better sleep that night. Over time, this small adjustment compounds into sharper focus, more resilience, and a healthier relationship with caffeine. You'll no longer feel enslaved to the cup in the morning, but instead empowered to use it as a tool. By reframing coffee not as a crutch, but as a strategic enhancer, you reclaim control over your biology. The cultural narrative says you can't start the day without coffee. The science says you don't need it right away, and by waiting, you make it work better for you. That is the essence of aligning your habits with your nervous system. Use what evolution already gave you and deploy tools like caffeine at the right time. If you want stable energy, clear focus, and restful sleep, then never chug caffeine immediately after waking. Wait, let your biology lead, and then bring in coffee when it will have the greatest impact. Your mornings shape your nights, and your nights shape the following day. By simply avoiding these 3 common mistakes, grabbing your phone, skipping sunlight, and drinking coffee too early, you'll align with your biology instead of fighting against it. Dr. Huberman's research reminds us that the key to focus, energy, and better sleep is not just what you add to your morning routine, but also what you never do. Protect the first hour of your day, and the rest of your day will fall into place with more clarity, energy, and control.